All right, so let's get going on today's class. So what we're going to do today is, this is a critical thinking session that we're going to look at today. And we're going to use our wrap-up of the higher order complex experimental designs that we looked at in order to engage in some critical thinking, a very important thing to remember when you're looking at quasi-independent variables. So specifically, we're going to revisit for the last time, the study on scholarship awards and attractiveness. So we've analyzed that one. We've taken a look at the entire story. We took a look at the interaction. And what we found was that there was an effect of attractiveness on who won scholarships. However, that effect interacted not just on how attractive an individual was, but also on whether the applications were from a male or whether they were from a female, and also whether the person judging the applications was a male or if they were a female. We needed to have all that information. And as we just recalled, this was the results where males judging males had this kind of pseudo flat inverted U effect, where males judging females had this classic halo effect going on right here, where more scholarships were given to the highly attractive and less scholarships given to the unattractive females. For females judging males, kind of the same halo effect going on. It's just more muted once you get past that middle attractiveness. And then this was the surprising result for females judging females, huge inverted U effect, where the most scholarships were given to the middle attractive females, and then by far the least out of the entire experiment were the highly attractive females being judged by the female judges. So what we're going to do today is we're going to focus and look at what caused this interaction. So the challenge here is that a quasi-independent variable brings with it many other possible factors. So we're going to flex our critical thinking muscles and try to figure out why this effect over here occurred, and see if those predictions make sense, see if those speculations make sense, and where they would point the sort of next step in a study like this. But before we get there, we got some writing stuff to do. So you have hopefully begun your discussion section. But what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at hypothesis and how to generate a hypothesis, how to test a hypothesis. Because if you recall, the first part of your discussion section is, does this study do the results support your hypothesis from the introduction? So we're going to be writing the introduction later. So write the discussion first, then write the introduction. But it is good to know about hypotheses right now so you can help formulate those so you can write your discussion section a little bit more efficiently. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We'll start with what goes into the discussion section, specifically how to deal with hypotheses. And then I'll see what you came up with since last week in terms of the interpretation of factorial designs and what we think the attractiveness and perceived academic merit studies can tell us about attractiveness in female judges, male judges, female applicants, male applicants. And this is all about interpreting quasi-independent variables and being careful when we're interpreting these quasi-independent variables. All right, so first the discussion section. So the discussion section, in terms of an outline, this is the outline you want to use. And we've looked at this, we introduced this a week ago. So just to reiterate, this is where you present the conclusions from your research. So does your study support the hypothesis that you had in the introduction, or do the results not support the hypothesis you had in the introduction? So that's how you start your conclusions. Are the hypotheses from your introduction supported or not supported? From that, you move to whether or not your research fits with the previous theory. So you've been reading about Roediger and McDermott and what they've said about reconstructive memory. Do what we have, or the results that we found in our study, Do they fit with what they thought about reconstructive memory? Why or why not? You've read about Weldon and Bellinger and their theories about collaborative memory. Is what we found consistent with what they thought about collaborative memory? Why or why not? What is it about our results that don't fit with theirs? What is it about our results that do fit with theirs? That's where you talk about whether your research fits with previous theories. And then once you're done saying whether or not we have supported theories or not supported theories, basically whether or not these theories are more likely to be true or whether or not their truth has taken a hit because our results don't fit with them. Once you're done with that section, then you move on to implications of the research. Typically in a professional article, you would have theoretical implications. What does this mean for psychology as a science? As well as practical implications. What does this suggest we should do in the real world? Because this is your first intro to writing writing a research paper, we're going to go with the easier of those two, which is the practical implications. So given what you know about the results that we had, given what you know about what our results say about group memories and false memories, group memories and confidence, how should the world, one aspect of the world, work? So again, what does this say about the judicial system? What does this say about the education system? What does this say about group therapy? What does this say about group study sessions? What does it say about board meetings for the financial, whatever it is? What does this say about some situation that is being done in groups? Should it continue to be done in groups? Should it not continue to be done in groups? And if so, what are the dangers of that, in terms of false memories and in terms of confidence? Because remember that working in groups did not lead to any higher levels of false memories, but it did lead to higher confidence in those false memories. So try to think of situations where that might be a problem and make the recommendation. That would be your implication, saying that, well, in the education system, maybe we shouldn't do group learning, group learning groups under these situations. And then finally, we got your future research directions. What would be the next step? What's the next step that you would want to take in this study? And the key thing here is that you need a reason. So no idea is a good idea for a future research direction until you explain what does that idea mean. So if you say, well, I'm interested in autism, and I want to see if autistic children show these same patterns of false memories. So I would do this study with autistic children. Great, you would do this study with autistic children. Why? What would it show? Why would you think it would be any different? And this is where you say, yeah, I think autistic children would be interesting because they don't interact as much socially. So social interaction is underlying these group memory effects. Then we should see less of these group memory effects in autistic children. If social interaction is not underlying these effects, then we should see exactly the same pattern. That's a great reason. Now it's a study I want to see. So make sure that whatever future research direction you suggest, say why it is that you want to do it. Not that it needs to be done or that you're interested in it or that you think it would be very interesting to do this. Specifically, here's a characteristic of this, future direction. And if that's true, this is what we should find. That's your explanation for a future research direction. Yep.
For the future research direction, that's strictly just like our opinion. Like if we were to run this experiment again, there's no wrong answer to that.
There is absolutely no wrong answer to the future research direction.
As long as we can give a reason.
Yes.
Second thing, are we going to go through like how you have the discussion formatted? Like, is there a specific format we're supposed to be writing this in? Like, how there's like headers and everything?
Yeah. So it is the APA style that we've been doing up until this point.
So
Just like what we've been doing. Remember, you're doing the manuscript form, not the submitted actual form. So go to that one experiment sample paper that you have in your textbook for a visual look at what it's supposed to look like. But basically, so far we've introduced APA headers, so that continues on into this discussion section. We've introduced the numbers, so that goes into this discussion section. If you're using numbers, make sure they're formatted correctly. And then the Times New Roman 12-point font, 1-inch margins all around, that's still going. The big new one here, and I don't know if I have it up on these slides, but the big new one is also citations. Is going to be a big one for the discussion section. So check the APA guidelines on citations. Citations basically have rules for whether they're an in-text citation or whether they're in parentheses. So if you mention the names of the authors in the text, if you say something like, Roediger and McDermott did this experiment, you would have Roediger and McDermott in the text. In brackets, you would have the year, 1995, and then you would say, did this experiment. If you say something like, researchers have studied reconstructive memory, and then in parentheses, you have Roediger and McDermott, comma, the year, those are two different ways to format citations. And in the one where they're in the text, the and is the word A-N-D. In the one where they're in parentheses, the and is the ampersand. So there's rules for in-text and out-of-text citation. There's rules for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 author citations. So if your article has 6 authors, check the rules for how to cite 6 authors. And there's basically a whole slew of rules depending upon what type of source you're using. So check those in your APA. Check those rules out. It'll be touched on in your appendix from your textbook. Also online resources like the OWL Purdue library resource online. You can find all examples of APA as well. But do check your citations, make sure that you're citing correctly, because when you're talking about previous theories, you have to cite, because you're talking about Weldon and Bellinger, so you got to give them a citation. You're talking about Roediger and McDermott, so you're going to have to give them a citation. So make sure that you're checking, is it in text, is it in parentheses, how many authors, and all that kind of little details. It's pretty straightforward, but if I was to enumerate all of the instances, we'd probably be here for the entire class, and it's just much simpler just to look it up and just be aware of that. All right, was those the 2 questions? Cool. All right, so the tip that I mentioned in terms of how to start, so how to present the conclusions from your research, the tip is to start your discussion section with whether or not your results support or refute your hypotheses from the introduction. So this is going to be a little bit of a challenge because we haven't written the introduction yet. But if you come up with the hypotheses, like we're going to show you how to do today, then you'll have a much easier time of writing the discussion, which will then give you a much greater ability to write the introduction. So you should start whether your results support or refute your hypothesis from the introduction. And the hint here is that one of your hypotheses, you need at least one. You can have more than one. 2 is usually preferable. One of them should support the hypothesis. That is, you should have one hypothesis in the introduction that after the entire experiment you find out, oh yeah, that hypothesis is true. And if that's not the case, rewrite your introduction. So these hypotheses, to give you an analogy, these are your suspects in your murder mystery novel. And you need to set up suspects in the introduction of your murder mystery novel. And then by the end of it, one of those suspects needs to be the murderer. If by the end of it, none of those suspects is the murderer, go back and rewrite your introduction so that one of them is the murderer. Same thing when you're writing your research report. Yep?
So if you have 2 hypotheses, does only one have to agree with it then?
Yes.
So if you have multiple, only one needs to agree with it.
Exactly. And those are actually, I'm glad you brought that up, those are actually better, more engaging articles where you have 2 hypotheses or more, because that's like, again, the analogy is the murder mystery novel, where if you just have one suspect, right? It's like the old Scooby-Doo cartoons. When you're watching them as a kid, you're like, oh, I wonder who the spooky specter is. And then you watch them as an adult, and you're like, there's one other character in this entire story. Of course, it's Old Man Jim. It's got to be, right? That's what a one hypothesis paper is like. If you're like, oh, well, this theory predicts this, then by the end of it, you're like, well, I'm pretty sure that's what they're going to find. But just because of the way that our human minds work, if you can come up with something that says, oh, this hypothesis predicts that groups should have higher confidence for their false memories. But this other theory leads to the hypothesis where groups should have lower confidence for their false memories. All of a sudden, the reader is like, oh my gosh, one theory says higher confidence, the other theory says lower confidence. Oh, which one is it? What's it going to be? I can't wait till they get to the end. It's just more engaging that way. But you need one. Like in this course, you don't need two. Two is great if you can make it, but you need at least one. You need at least one that says, according to this theory here, this is what we should find in our study. And then if you only have the one, by the end of it, that's what you find in your study. If you got two, then one of them might be right, one of them might be wrong. They could both be right. They could have both predicted the results, as long as they're both not wrong. Because you don't want it where none of your hypotheses are supported, because again, that's like getting to the end of a murder mystery novel, and none of the introduced characters ends up being the murderer. And it's even worse than introducing a final character in the final act, because if none of them are the murderer, you're basically like, could you imagine reading a murder mystery novel where they're like, well, it's not the butler, it's not the maid, and it's not the mailman. I guess we'll never know. The end, right? I mean, it's not satisfying. All right. So how do we get these hypotheses? So we do want a hypothesis that's supported, and you start off your discussion with our results support hypothesis number one, that we would find higher, confidence levels in groups. Our results do not support hypothesis number two, that said we should find lower confidence, right? So whatever it is, you start off with our results either support this hypothesis or don't. So how do we get those hypotheses? Well, we do it by taking a look at our results and then seeing whether or not the theories that we know of, the theories that we've been reading about in our journal articles, if those theories are true and we did what we did in our experiment, what should we have found? And that is the essence of a hypothesis. If this theory is true and we did our experiment, then this should have occurred. That's that if-then hypothesis structure. So when you're working on your hypotheses, keep in mind that we got 4 key results. And the first thing to keep in mind is that your hypothesis does not have to predict all 4. So do not for a second think that you need to have one theory that somehow predicts all 4 of these outcomes. You need a theory that predicts one of them at least. Maybe you'll get 2, I don't know, but at least one of them is doable. So we have 4 key results. We got the percent recall for correct items, right? We have the simplified version that singles recalled fewer correct items than groups did. That's key result number 1. Singles recalled fewer items than groups. So we need a theory that predicts either that this should have happened or predicts that this should not have happened. We need a theory that touches on percent recall for correct items and singles versus groups. So we can take a look at things like Weldon and Bellinger. And in Weldon and Bellinger, they have a theory, and they put forward this theory that collaborative groups, actually this is a result, collaborative groups recalled more than individuals, but less than nominal groups. So this is going to be an example of how to work with theories that might not touch exactly on what you're doing. So the first move that I'll mention is that notice that we've simplified what we're talking about. We're talking about singles versus groups. Not singles versus pairs versus triples. We've said, all right, let's just kind of conceptualize this as these people are single, these people are in groups, because that way you can apply any study that has looked at singles versus groups. It might be groups of 5. It doesn't matter, singles versus groups. It might be groups of 2. It doesn't matter, singles versus groups. It might be groups of 10. Doesn't matter, single versus groups. So by changing this to singles versus groups, it makes it easier to connect research that might have used 5 people instead of just 1. So the next thing here is you take a statement like this, where in Weldon and Bellinger, collaborative groups were called more than individuals, but less than nominal groups. And sometimes you'll see a theory like this, or a result like this, and you want to use part of it, but you can't use all of it, because we didn't have nominal groups. We didn't do that aspect of it. So you can just take that out, And you can say, all right, well, Weldon and Bellinger said this, but what applies to our situation is that collaborative groups recalled more than individuals. So, collaborative groups recalled more than individuals, which means that groups of students, collaborative groups, should recall more correct words than individual students. So, if collaborative groups recalled more than individuals, and we did our experiment, then we should find that the groups of students recalled more correct words than individuals. This is the prediction from the hypothesis. And lo and behold, we found that groups recalled more than singles. That's what we predicted. Our results support this hypothesis. So this is one example of a hypothesis that you can make, that if this theory is true, and we do our experiment, then we should find groups of students should recall more correct words than individuals. So far, so good? Okay, so that is key result number 1. We also have key result number 2 of 4. For the critical items, for the false memories, singles recalled the same amount of false memories as groups, right? So singles here had the same proportion of false memories as the two groups here did. So once again, we need a theory that touches on how much should groups recall and how much should singles recall. So we go back to Weldon and Bellinger, and they had a prediction. They had a result that said collaborative groups recall more than individuals. So if that's the case, notice that they don't say anything about false memories or correct memories. They just say collaborative groups recall more than individuals. So in that case, if collaborative groups recall more than individuals, and we set up a situation where false memories are recalled, according to this, we predict that groups of students should recall more critical words than individuals. According to this, that's what should have happened in our experiment. However, groups of students should recall more critical words. Groups of students did not recall more critical. It was the same. So in this case, our results do not support this hypothesis. So you can see that our results for the correct words support Weldon and Bellinger's theories on collaborative memory. Our results from the false memories do not support Weldon and Bellinger's theories on false memory. All right, confidence for correct items. Now let's take a look at the two confidence parts of it. So for the confidence for correct items, we found that singles are just as confident as pairs in groups of 3. So we can say this in terms of singles are just as confident as groups. So we can take a look at Weldon and Bellinger once again. And lo and behold, it says, well, in Weldon and Bellinger, it goes, collaborative groups recalled more than individuals. Weldon and Bellinger did nothing on confidence. You could really try to stretch and do some sort of complicated chain of reasoning to kind of bring this into the confidence confidence realm. Or you can more logically and correctly, I would argue, realize that Weldon and Bellinger didn't touch on confidence, and that's fine. So they make no prediction, right? They didn't measure confidence. They didn't look at confidence. We have this confidence result. They have a theory that makes no prediction. That's fine, right? We don't need one theory to predict everything. We just need one theory to predict at least one of the 4 results that we have. So in this case, in the introduction, we wouldn't make a prediction about confidence. We wouldn't have a hypothesis about what we would expect to happen in confidence based on Weldon and Bellinger's data. Now, Roediger and McDermott, they have the remember no paradigm that they use. They had the thing where people rated, is this a word that you remember, or is this a word that you know was on the list? And that ties into confidence. So you could tie in Roediger and McDermott's to make a prediction for confidence here. But as it turns out, to just finish this off, confidence for critical items. Singles had less confidence than groups for the critical items for the false memories. And once again, going back to Weldon and Bellinger, they got nothing to say. So if you realize that they don't touch upon confidence, if they're not talking about confidence, don't try to stretch it and make a prediction about confidence. You have 6 sources, you have 6 articles. Use another article and make a prediction based on those articles. So that's just to make you feel a little bit more comfortable. If you're looking at a theory and you're like, well, this is a great theory, but I can't connect it to our experiment, that's fine. That's no worries there. Get another theory and connect it to this part, or connect it to another one of those key results. All right, so this is basically how you would come up with hypotheses. So based on your readings, pick out a theory, make a hypothesis. If this theory is true, given what we did in our experiment, what should we find? If the prediction is what we found, then our results support that hypothesis. If the prediction is not what we found, then our results do not support that hypothesis. Mm-hmm.
So do we only have to find, make a hypothesis through one article?
It can just be one.
But then we
Yeah.
still compare it to all the other ones in the discussion, or just that one?
Not necessarily. So what you would want, some of them might say the same things. A lot of this work was built on Roediger and McDermott's. So they might all have, this sort of reconstructive framework of memory. But usually, these different articles exist because they have different ideas. So you don't have to do it for all 6. Now, at some point, just so that we're clear on this, you will cite all 6 articles in your research paper. There's a requirement that somehow they all go into your research paper. Now, just defining these terms, setting up the idea of reconstructive memory and group memory in the introduction is where you're going to cite a lot of your articles. And in your results, in your discussion section, our results support this idea is where you can cite other ideas. But if you do have that one article that's left over, if you have that one article where you just can't fit it in the introduction and you just can't fit it into your discussion section at the beginning, the implications is one possible place always to put that one last little article and basically say, oh, my article is about the education system. It looked at reconstructive memory in the education system. So one implication for us, based on what they said about this article, and you can cite it there. If that doesn't work, your last and guaranteed option is the future research. And basically say, I'm thinking of looking at false memories in the mating patterns of wolves, because this article was on the mating patterns of wolves and I need to cite it. So according to them, wolves mate according to these rules, and if there's false memories, then we'll find this, but if there's no false memories, we'll find that. That future research directions is always your last guaranteed hope to get that final citation.
So for the discussion, you don't have to cite or compare it or anything?
No, you don't have to go through all 6 articles.
Is there a limit that a minimum that you want us to compare
One.
this to? Just one?
One. That's the minimum. 2 would be great. If you can find, again, so the requirements of it is you have one theory that you made a prediction on, you made a hypothesis on, and in the discussion section you say, yes, this supported that hypothesis because it predicted this, we found this, and then yes, that supports this theory because it says, that's the minimum requirement. If you got 2, it's not required, but if you got 2 hypotheses, it's just more compelling to say something like, oh, it supported this hypothesis was supported, but this one was not, right? But really just for the exercise of making sure we can do a hypothesis, making sure we can tie it back to a theory, we just need the one. And it just needs to be on one of these things. So if you can't at all tie in the confidence results, that's fine. Make your predictions about the percent recall. If you can't do the percent recall, then you're reading Roediger and McDermott or Weldon and Bellinger incorrectly, right? Because it's all, they do use those. But if you can't tie them all in, that's fine. You don't need to.
But you can use different ones for
Oh, yeah.
hypothesis?
Oh, yes.
And we don't use this one same word?
Nope, not at all. This is just to illustrate it.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right. So just a reminder, there's the due dates, November 18th by midnight. has to be submitted on time. This is the last one that's going to be peer reviewed, so make sure that you submit that on time so it can be included in that peer review process. The sweet spot for this, you put in enough sort of detail, enough information, enough explanation. We're looking for that 2.5 pages of double-spaced text again, 12-point font, 1-inch margins all around, and anonymously submitted through Turnitin, and then it will be added to the peer review. All right, any final questions on the discussion section? All right, back to the study. So we're going to talk about interpreting quasi-independent variables for the remainder of this class today, because one of the big astounding findings in this study was, especially for female applicants, how different the responses of male applicants were and how different the responses of female applicants were. And intuitively, our minds naturally go to what's visible. And we say, when we see that females judge female applicants with that inverted U, and we see that males judge female applicants with that halo effect, we immediately jump to the conclusion in our minds that that's just because the way that men are. That's how men are programmed, that's what being a male means, and that's just the way that females are. That's the way that females are programmed, that's just the way that being female, that's what being female means. And that would be true if this was not a quasi-independent variable. So what we mean by quasi-independent variable is whether or not you can randomly assign the levels of the variable. If you can randomly assign the levels of a variable, that is a full independent variable. So for example, target sex, the applications that people were looking at, that is a pure, full independent variable. Because when somebody walks through the lab, I can flip my coin and randomly assign them, you're going to look at 3 male applicants, or I can flip my coin and randomly assign them, you're going to look at 3 female applicants. This is a full independent variable. This is a full independent variable because everybody got high, middle, and low, right? So they didn't have random assignment, but everybody experienced high, everybody experienced middle, and everybody experienced low levels of attractiveness. The one independent variable, though, that couldn't be randomly assigned was this one here, subject sex. So when a person walked through the lab, I couldn't flip a coin and make them male, right? According to a random flip. I couldn't make them female. I just had to know, are you male or are you female? And then the males were placed in the male group, the females were placed in the female group. So it was a systematic use of this, but I couldn't randomly assign it. And because you can't randomly assign it, there's potential baggage that comes along with this. So that a result like the one that we saw is not necessarily due to the fact that females are just like that, and it's not necessarily due to the fact that that's just the way that males are. It could be due to other factors. Now, before we go into the discussion of what those possible other factors might be, I just want to mention that there are some differences. There are some psychological behavioral differences that do seem to be because that's the way that males are, and they do seem to be that that's the way that females are. So another way of saying this is that there are some behavioral differences that seem to be genetic. So these are the 23 chromosomes that house all the DNA in a human being. And this right here is the sex chromosome. And if you have an X chromosome and you have a Y chromosome, you are genetically male. If you have 2 X chromosomes, then you are genetically female. And as it turns out, the difference in the missing code here actually has some profound behavioral differences. It makes a difference. We do differ on our behavior according to this kind of genetic code. So we'll go over some examples of behaviors that seem to be genetically programmed. seem to be, that's the way that a genetic male is, and that's the way that a genetic female is. That's just the differences between the two, and it's not any sort of extraneous baggage that comes along with it. All right, so what are some of these things? Well, males have been shown, and this seems to be biologically defined, males are better at throwing things. So most of these can be tied back to or explained away in terms of evolutionary history. So back when we were all cave people, males tended to be the hunters, women tended to be the gatherers, and if males went out there and had their spear and threw it on a mastodon and it went nowhere, then that male did not bring home any food to his family, that male did not keep his family healthy, and all his little cave babies did not survive into adulthood to make more little cave babies for his pathetic genetics for throwing things to be propagated. The male that could throw things very far, throw that spear, kill that mastodon, brought a whole bunch of food back to his family was nice and healthy, he had a ton of little cave babies, those cave babies had more cave babies, those cave babies had more cave babies, and that gene for being able to throw was selected for and propagated for. So as it turns out, because back in the caveman days, males did more of the hunting that required throwing things, you can actually see throwing things is, males are better at throwing things. Now, on this note, I feel obligated, because I'm seeing some stares, I feel obligated to say that this is average. All right, so this is in no way saying that the top female softball player can't throw faster than me. This is in no way saying that I could go and replace Jenny Finch, in some softball league or anything like that. But what it does say is that on average, males throw better than females. On average, females are better at place memory. So place memory is memory for where things are. So if I told everybody here to take a look around this room and study what is out here, and then we all went outside, and I said, which column, which row of chairs has a pink jacket on it? Well, the females in this class would tend to do better than the males in this class, and that's place memory. And this again is tied to that hunter-gatherer way of lifestyle, that evolutionary pressures, because women were the gatherers, so you had to remember where the raspberry bushes were. You had to remember where the apple trees were, where the nuts were, where the water was. And the better your memory for that, the more little cave babies you had that had more little cave babies, and it went on and on. Other things that seem to be genetically linked. Spatial rotation. Don't ask me why. Males are better at rotating things in their minds, rotating things in space. I'm not sure exactly why, but that just seems to be one of these things that just seems genetically programmed. Was there a question? No? All right, other things. Color perception. Women in general are better at color perception. This has to do with the fact that a lot of the code that is on a lot of the code for your rods and your cones, so the rods and cones in your retina, a lot of those are coded on your X and Y chromosomes. So if this is the male chromosomes and this is the female chromosomes, and this is where your rods and cones are programmed, genetically programmed, if something's wrong with your code, right? Let's say you had a little mutation. Let's say that your code screwed up. Well, if you're a male, that's it. You've lost that cone, and you're colorblind. If you're a female, and that code is messed up, well, then your other chromosome is like, don't worry, I got it. I still have a copy. I can make yourself a cone. So that's why if you take a look at the prevalence of colorblindness, it's way higher in males. And actually, interestingly, some females are actually super color perceivers. So one of the cones, your long cone, your red cone, actually has two versions of it. And what happens sometimes is that you'll get a female that has version A on one cone, on one X chromosome, and has version B on the other chromosome. And in her retina, she ends up having 4 cones. So it kind of looks like this. So the same way that you're supposed to have 3 cones, and if you're colorblind, you only have 2, and that's why you can't distinguish between that many colors. Well, going from 3 to 4 is going to let you distinguish even more colors. So it's even better color distinction than what a typical person can have. And historically, these were the women that were the sort of healing women in their tribe. They were the almost like the magical women in their tribe, because they were the ones that could take a look at a pear tree, and everybody else just saw green pears, but they would take a look at it and say, that one will be ripe in a week, and that one is ripe right now. And people would look at them and say, how do you know they're all green? And they'll be like, well, that one's slightly greener than that one. And people would be like, I can't see it. And they'll be like, well, I can. And they would take a look at somebody and say, you're infected. You have a disease. And other people would say, how do you know? I look exactly like they do. And they'd say, no, you don't, because I got 4 cones and you don't. Yep.
So what about that? Because I know some guy, like I have a guy friend that only has certain colors he can't see. So what determines what colors they get mixed up or can't see, rather than like being completely colorblind? You understand what I'm saying?
Yep. So basically, what happens is your brain analyzes the pattern of activation when you're looking at colors, right? So pure colors will activate, this will be like red, this will be green, and this will be blue, right? So what typically happens is somebody that's colorblind will be missing one of these, right? And if they're colorblind and missing one of these, then when they're looking at something that's green, this cone is going to be sending a very strong signal to their brain, right? When they're looking at something blue, typically if they had this cone would be sending a very strong signal, and this one would be sending a somewhat strong signal, right? It would be sending a somewhat weaker signal than this one over here. And what your brain says, it says, oh, I got a really strong signal coming from the blue cone. I got a lesser signal coming from the green cone. I'm seeing this shade of blue. Now, if you take that away, then green has a maximal signal from the green cone. Blue has a maximal signal from the green cone, because your brain is still saying, oh, my green cones are responding the most. It must be green. And that's why you get things like blue-green color blindness. And that's why you'll never get like blue-red color blindness. I don't even know if that's a thing. I wouldn't think it is, but that's what happens with color blindness. Now,
like red, brown,
if you lose that, then you don't see any color, because all you got is the one cone. You can see bright and dark. That's it. Yeah, so what was it you were saying about your friend?
it is like red-brown, like shades of red and shades of brown.
Okay.
They look great at him. Like they can't see a difference.
He, I would have to.
Red, brown, and orange, like those like weird warm colors.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what you're. That's exactly what I'm having a hard time figuring this out. Because where is orange and where is brown?
He literally only wears black for a reason.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you were a child and you were painting, and you had red, yellow, and blue, and you would say, "Oh, I want to do green." So you would mix yellow and blue, and you'd be like, "Oh, I want to do purple," and you mix red and blue. And then eventually you'd be like, I want to do brown. And you'd be like, what do I mix? Yeah, no, but that gives you gray, right? That gives you like it just sucks. But yeah, well, exactly, that's the thing. Like how much of each color is hard. That's why I'm having a hard time thinking, what cone is this guy missing? But he's missing something. Yeah, but if he can tell the difference between colors, at least at some level, even if it's just, well, I can tell this is red and this is green, right, or whatever it is. As long as he can tell some colors apart, then he's not missing. He's missing 2.
He sees blue a lot.
Okay. So he would be missing 2 in that case. But anyways, notice he's a male, right? Nobody in this class is saying, "Oh yeah, my female friend." The color blindness that because I'm not saying that there aren't females that are colorblind, but they're much less likely to be colorblind. So females are better at color perception. All right, the last genetic difference, although I don't know if this one is genetic, and this is something to keep in mind. This is why we continue to do psychology. So all of these ones that I've shown so far, they all have a ton of data behind them that they're genetic. But this next one had a ton of data behind it that is genetic, but it might not be. And that is that males are better at dying. We're way better at death. And what I mean by this is that if you take a look at the average life expectancy, in the 70s, women expected to live to about 75 years old. That's from birth. So once you were born, you had a life expectancy going to 75. Males were only expected to live up until 67. And just a few years ago, that increased to 81 years for females because of increases in medicine. Guys have made it to 76. So a male in 2013 is basically doing as well as a female back in 1970. And it's even worse than that. So does anybody know what the conception rates are for males and females? So out of, for every 100 females that are conceived, how many males are conceived? It's not 100. It eventually becomes 50-50, but it's not 50-50. Does anybody know?
20.
It's 150 or to 180 males are conceived for every 100 females. What happens is because of that missing piece of genetic material, a lot of those babies die. A lot of those babies are stillborn or miscarriages. So if somebody has a miscarriage, probability is that they miscarried a male. Because out of those 180 males that are conceived, and those 100 females that are conceived, by the time they're born, it's like 110 to 100 in terms of males that actually make it to birth. By the time they're teenagers, it's 100 to 100. And from that point on, it's just more women than males throughout the entire rest of the lifespan. So, well, that's what I mean by like how many are conceived, right? How many males are conceived? It's 180 to every 100 females. So the reason that so this was a long time seen as genetic. The reason that I bring up that it might not be is because recent cultural studies, if you take a look at male life expectancy across the world, and you take a look at female life expectancy across the world, and see for each country, how long are males expected to live, how long are females expected to live, that's the data right there. So you can see just in about every single country, women are expected to live longer. In fact, it is every single country. There is not a country in the world where men are expected to live longer than females. But if it was genetic, like I said, our minds go there. If you were superior, right? If women were superior, then this gap shouldn't be different for different countries. So why is this country having women far outlive their males, whereas this country does not? They're on equal footing. Why is there different gaps between these? And the new research and the new ideas kind of suggest that it's not genetic, that males do not have to die off so soon after they're born. And this is my little PSA for International Men's Day, which is coming up in about 5 days. So there seems to be something cultural going on here that is driving or causing men to die a lot sooner. And the sooner we fix this life expectation gap, I think the better we'll be as a society.
Is that not like environmental? Like it's not including that, or like?
It's environmental stuff. It has to be environmental.
But women
Otherwise, this would be the same. This would be the same distance across the entire line.
Like, what is the country that's like right on the line?
Yeah, I know. I want to figure out what's that country.
What is the one that's
What's
like
that country?
exact?
First off, what are any of these countries where everybody's dying at 50, right? Like let's
You gotta think, like,
let's at least get to 65 and stay back there.
areas have a lot of development, it's like being spread that don't have access to like medicine.
Yeah.
Like how
But well, let's think about that critically. Are they saving the medicine just for the women?
No.
Then why are there differences?
We have a better immune system.
Not necessarily.
Then why are there
Women have-
differences?
Sucks.
I know, but women have higher morbidity than males do though.
What was that? They have higher morbidity?
Yes, we have lower health than males do, however, we live longer than males do.
Oh.
Our mortality is higher, our morbidity is lower.
So what is morbidity, just so we're clear on this?
Basically our overall health and
Okay.
and whatnot. It's-
If you get sick, you're more likely to die, but if you
Yeah,
don't get sick, you live
exactly,
longer.
yeah.
We can
And
handle more. We can push out a baby. That's a
there's
lot.
that.
Well, again, on that note, and this is why, but this is kind of critical thinking skills that you need to develop. If the argument is that women can take more because they can push out a baby, what's going on with these women here?
That's
Are they
amazing.
unable to? Are they unable to push out babies?
They're
Right?
infertile. They're infertile.
So we have a country here that's.
Yeah.
So well, do that experiment, do that
Also,
study.
who's pushing out a baby at 55?
Well, no, these are life expectancies.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Women can die during birth too,
Yeah, no, they can.
but some don't.
Which, again, begs the question, why is it in every case they're outliving males?
We can make it.
And why is it that it's different for different ones?
I'm sorry,
know?
like the reinvented here.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's another thing to bear in mind.
Can we see where like we are?
Oh, I don't remember what it is. No, actually, yeah, I'll let you guys know where you are. You are,
My memo is 93.
where did we go? You are right there. That's North
That's in
America.
2013.
Yeah. Oh, that's in 2013, yeah. I actually think this might go down for the first time in our history because I had just read articles about how millennials are actually less healthy than the previous generation at this point. So who knows?
It went down.
Who knows by 2025 this might go back to 67 and 75 probably.
No, it went down. In 2016, the female life expectancy is lower. It's 78.
Yeah. What happened to male life expectancy?
Males is 78 as
Oh,
well.
yeah, millennials, that's not.
No, it's not the same.
It says it.
Oh yeah?
That's in America. Yeah, in America.
Oh, okay.
In just America.
Wow.
Wait, so that's interesting that just in America we have the same life expectancy.
That's cool.
But like there's decimals. It was 78.98 for females, but it's 78.69 for males.
Well, decimals, I mean, that's
I didn't
a
know
couple
if
of
that
months.
changed anything.
But that's cool.
We're the
So
one
wait,
on the line.
what were the numbers? 78?
78. Yeah.
Okay.
We're the one on the end.
No, we're one of the ones over here.
78.
So probably like that one right there,
But this doesn't.
but we brought it down.
This is in 2016 though.
Okay.
Is this the 2013 one or no?
This is, I can't remember, no, this might be, I can't remember what year this was. Yep.
There are
Okay.
people living longer in Canada.
So we have, I know, what did I ever leave?
Right over there.
I don't know, universal healthcare might have something to do with that. This might be a nice little thing, you know? But, yeah, so, again, the question is if it was genetic, and that's the kind of one of the overarching points of this, if this result is because of this, how did the result ever get smaller, right? How did the gap ever decrease? Because if it's a genetic thing where men just live less than women, then we shouldn't be able to improve that. Anything that improves health should improve health across the board, but again, it's it doesn't occur. So, anyways, let's go on. We got about 20 minutes left. So let's take a look now. So those were the things that were probably genetic. So those findings that we looked at were probably genetic differences that cause these behavioral outcomes. So when they did those quasi-independent studies, they were able to, through other means, come to the conclusion that, you know what, this seems to be genetic. That's where our mind kind of goes. And we saw it in this discussion. We see a result like this, and it's all of a sudden it has to be because women are like that. Women can do this. Women can push out babies. And that's where this kind of leads our mind. Whenever you look at quasi-independent variables, we tend to take a look at what's visible, female versus male. So what we want to do now is we want to say, in terms of critical thinking, because these were not randomly assigned, it could be that this difference we see here, it could be that difference is due to genetics, right? So it's possible. But it's also possible that it's due to other factors that are associated with being male and associated with being female in any society. So we'll engage our critical thinking right now, and we'll ask, what do we think caused this interaction? Can anybody think of reasons why this is the curve for females judging females, why this is the curve for males judging females, or any of the other curves, if you can explain why is there that difference between male judges and female judges?
I feel like how they're taught to act, like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that like still kind of just goes back to like boys would be boys, but like, or girls would be girls, but like, I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what it goes back to, because you're getting there. Boys will be boys and girls will be girls carries with it two meanings. Number one, boys are genetically programmed to be boys. Girls are genetically programmed to be girls. The other thing is, boys have been taught to be boys, girls have been taught to be girls. And as we saw, there's part of it that says, here's your genetics, here's your behavior, right, as we saw previously. But there's a lot more that is like, here's how we're going to treat you, and because of that, here's your behaviors. So that's kind of what we're asking here. What about the way that women are treated in society, or viewed in society, or interact with society, might have led to this curve, whereas males, the way that they interact with society, led to this curve. I'll give you, why is it when females judge other females, we have this huge U shape, whereas when males judge other males, we get a much smaller U shape? So what's going on? What might be going on in any of these sort of interactions? Competition. How so?
Well, among women, especially if you're looking at woman to woman, it's a competition of resources.
Mm-hmm.
So if you find someone who's more attractive, your instinct is to want to maybe hoard the resources and not allow them to move forward.
Okay, so
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So you're thinking that it's limited resources.
Yeah,
Right.
in a way.
Okay,
But
yeah.
how our mind may perceive it. So
Okay.
not in an overt way.
So the
But-
perception of limited resources.
Exactly, going
Okay.
back to the caveman
Yeah.
perception.
So that's an excellent example of what else might be going on here. That's a great example of what else, other than male versus female, could potentially explain this. So there have been a lot of lawsuits that have been brought up against universities, because a lot of universities have instituted female-only scholarships. And the idea was that they were going to make up for the fact that the scholarship winners tended to be more male. So they wanted to have these opportunities just for females. They were brought to court under Title IX discrimination practices. But that's a nice indication that there is that idea that scholarships are a more scarce resource for females. Well, he doesn't think so. They're a scarcer resource for females than they are for males. So let's say that that's the case, and females are walking in there, and they're like, "Oh, this is a scholarship, committee. So my scarcity mechanism is going off. Like, this is something that there's not a lot of." And then they see the highly attractive candidate, and this effect of intergroup attractiveness, let's just say, mixes with the scarcity, right? So they say, you know what? There's an effect of attractiveness here, and it is getting exacerbated because I feel that opportunities for women are lower. right? As a woman, right? Females judging females. As a woman, I kind of feel like we don't have as many opportunities. So all of a sudden, the effect of attractiveness kicks in, and they say, no way am I giving this to the highly attractive individual. Notice that this speculation makes sense. It's supported by the data, because if males walk in there and they say, oh, this is a scholarship, and there's tons of scholarships, to go around, they shouldn't show this effect as much. And notice they don't, right? Importantly, they do show the effect, right? It's less, but notice males do give the medium attractive males more scholarships. They give less scholarships to the highly attractive males. So it could be that males are still feeling this threat from these attractive individuals in their own group, but it's not as effective because they don't perceive the scarcity as well. So a prediction that would come out from this is that if more scholarships are available to females, what should happen is this huge thing, this huge U-shaped curve should squeeze down, and it should look much more like this male curve. So if 20 years down the line, this study gets replicated, and at that point, women are receiving scholarships at the same rate as men are receiving scholarships, we should expect this curve to be the curve that's there for males and there for females as well. Importantly, note that this explanation has nothing to do with females are females and males are males. Females are programmed this way genetically, males are programmed this way genetically. It has to do with the fact that attractiveness affects both of them, but in this society, females have more scarcity for scholarships than males do, and that scarcity is what is going on here. So the quasi-independent variable of sex, male or female, is not really picking up a male or female difference. It's picking up a scarcity, no scarcity difference instead. All right, other speculations, other ideas? All right, does anybody, in terms of, in our society, in terms of the effect of attractiveness, in terms of the benefits of being attractive, do we think that women benefit more in our society from being attractive, or do we think that males benefit more in our society from being attractive? Sure?
Females.
Who says males benefit more? Who says females benefit more? All right, you got the females right. I would have to say the females are right. I'll give you an anecdotal example, and after this you can tell me if I've convinced you or not. All right, where'd we go? Okay, here we go. That's Anna Kournikova. Does anybody know the history of tennis? Does anybody know who Anna Kournikova is? All right, so she was a professional tennis player. She was, I think, hit her peak sometime in the late 90s, early 2000s, but the highest she was ever ranked was 7th worldwide, right? So highly skilled. I'm not going to take anything away from her. Highly skilled. The highest she was ranked was 7th. She was hated amongst her competitors because she brought in, and she had endorsement contracts that were orders of magnitude greater than the number 1 ranked player. And they were much greater than the number 2 ranked player. So here was this number 7th ranked player who was getting millions of dollars more in endorsements than the top tennis players. And the reason for that was because she looked like this. So this physical attractiveness led to legions of fans, right? They even spelled it right. And it led to endorsements, right? Like this endorsement from, looks like a bra company, only the ball should bounce. So you would think in a celebrity endorsement, you would take a look at who's the top player, right? Who's the number 1 talent? Who's the best player? We want them to give our endorsements. That didn't happen. her attractiveness allowed her to surpass. It gave her the benefit of surpassing all of those better players and making much more money than the number 1, the number 2, the number 3 ranked players. All right, that's Anna Kournikova. That's what happened with her. Does anybody know who this is? This is Wally Szczerbiak. Does anybody know who he's playing with? Okay, so he's an NBA player, and when he was drafted, they thought, so he was drafted, you can see here, he's drafted by the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Minnesota Timberwolves thought that he was going to be the cornerstone of their promotion. They thought that he was going to be this player that they could kind of promote their brand across. And as it turned out, he was a pretty good player. He wasn't LeBron James. He was a starter for a lot of his career, but he just, he wasn't a superstar. He was a very good player. He wasn't a superstar. One of the reasons that they thought that he would be a massive draw, a massive pull, was partly because he was a good player. He was, I would say, Anna Kournikova level in terms of skill. But really they liked him because this is what he looked like. He was a good-looking guy. He had the six-pack, he had the muscles, he's got that chiseled look, he's got everything. He didn't get any endorsements, right? The endorsements didn't come a knocking on his door because he looked like this. So Anna Kournikova, tons of money because she looked like that. Same level player, no money. Even though, as in terms of attractiveness, highly, highly attractive. So I would argue in our society, women benefit much more from attractiveness. And that's why the makeup industry is driven by women. If guys benefited from being attractive, we would wear makeup too. If guys benefited more from being attractive, we would have a little bit more variety in our clothing to show off our best assets, right? Guys do not benefit in our culture as much from being attractive. Again, anecdotal, but I think very kind of indicative. So, on that note, I would say, females judging other females, males judging other males, we have a mechanism in our mind about fairness. It's a belief in a fair world is one of the kind of psychological principles. We believe the world should be fair, right? We believe that somehow things should even out. And if you know, because of the society that you live in, as a woman, if you have felt this, where you have been passed up for opportunities, for the better looking individual got the opportunities. If you were passed up because of your average attractiveness and somebody who was highly attractive, got the promotion. If you felt that and you see somebody who's highly attractive, that unfair mechanism gets launched in your brain. And you say, no way, not this time, right? The world has handed you way too much. You're extremely gorgeous, but you're not getting this scholarship. Not if I can help it. I'm going to make the world fair. For males don't feel that, right? As long as you're decent looking, right? As long as you're okay. And this bears that out, right? As long as you're okay. Look, even for women judging males, as long as you're okay, as long as you put some effort in, you can still be attractive. You can still gain the benefits. And males don't feel it as much. And because of that, there's no need to balance the fairness. When you see that highly attractive male, males don't feel like, well, this person's been handed everything. Everybody's been falling over themselves, to help this attractive male individual. You don't feel that way, so that unfair mechanism doesn't get triggered, and we'd have those effects there. So this, once again, could be nothing more than the fact that women benefit more from attractiveness in our society than males do. Interestingly, if the current trends continue and this world becomes more visual, and as a result, males tend to care more and more and more about their appearance. So you have more fashion magazines, more fashion blogs dedicated to males every single day, more beauty regimens. We have companies coming out with products specifically for male beauty products. If that's the case and that trend continues, what we could expect is in 20 years, if we reran this study in 2039, when attractiveness is as beneficial to males as it is to females, what should happen is this curve here should still be there, but this curve will mirror this curve. So males looking at another male would say, you know what? I've watched all the beauty blogs and I've tried all the contouring with the eyebrow pencils and I still can't get my cheekbones to look as defined as this guy. There's no way he's getting a scholarship. He's going down here, and we'll see this curve for males judging males. All right, any other speculations? We kind of ran out of time. We spent a lot of time deciding when men and women die. But any other kind of ideas about things that might be happening here? All right, so we'll wrap it up here. But importantly, hopefully this was able to drive home that point, that when you're dealing with a quasi-independent variable, and this will be my sort of wrap up for this, when you're dealing with a quasi-independent variable, as psychologists, as trained critical thinkers, we have to identify, yes, this is a quasi-independent variable, and then say to ourselves, one way to interpret it is to say it's the effect of the variable. Another way to interpret it is to say it's the baggage that comes with it. So when we see a result like this, our critical thinking mind should say, maybe, because females are genetically like this, males are genetically like this. Or maybe, scarcity versus non-scarcity. Or maybe, effective attractiveness versus no effective attractiveness. Or maybe there was a few others that we didn't have a chance to go to. But we need to start bringing in those possibilities, because when this result was first published and it got taken in by popular media, if you just looked at the comment section, the amount of hate being spewed at females because of this, and the amount of opinions that this is just the way that women are, was astounding, because that's where our mind goes. It goes to what's visible. It goes to these are female, these are males. So immediately it's gotta be because that's how women are, that's how males are. As psychologists and critical thinkers, we gotta take a step back and say, that's one possibility, but maybe scarcity versus non-scarcity. Maybe effectiveness of beauty versus no effectiveness of beauty. Maybe anything else that has to do with being a female in our society versus anything else that has to do with being a male in our society. And that is where we will end for today.